When we recognize that we are all mad, the mysteries disappear and life stands explained. Mark Twain said that. I'm Arthur, this is Katie, and welcome to A Question of Meaning. I said that.
Reference Bob Dylan.
I'll let you be in my dream if I can be in yours.
So we were kind of having a discussion about what we're going to do our show about this week before we turn the camera on, but I guess with that epigraph, or is that what you call the opening quote, we decided we'll do this on insanity, which is a great topic. We've kind of been, if you've watched our show before, you'll notice that we talk about insanity quite a bit and reference a book that we've been working on, We Are All Innocent by Reason of Insanity.
A title that we mean every word of.
That's right, and mention insanity a lot. So, and it looked like we hadn't really done anything devoted to this topic, so seemed like a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think why it came up for me is we were going to do a show on the criminal justice system and why we think that's another perfect symptom of universal human insanity.
Yeah, so that'd be good to do after the show, so that for people, those one or two of you out there that actually watch our show regularly.
You're out there. You're a bunch of lurkers.
Yeah, we actually got a wonderful phone call this week about somebody that's been watching our show regularly. That was very nice.
Gentleman out in Canton.
Yeah,
Thanks very much. I want to send you a copy of our book.
That's right. So insanity. Okay, well, we usually like to start with kind of defining our terms, and I was thinking about this, because I've had problems with getting too hung up on definitions, and I think some people out there may feel the same way. It's like, why bother? Well, definitions, what
you have your truth and I have my truth, man. You know what I'm saying? It's just as valid.
That's right.
Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, absolutely, but everyone is not entitled to their own facts.
So
Big
for
difference.
Definitions, I mean, as you will see, we're going to get to that we believe that each one of us is living in our own version of reality. We each have our own individual version, which is going to, as you'll see, is why we say we're insane. So what a definition serves to do is it serves to align our realities behind the meaning of a word, so we're on the same page, so that we can discuss it and be talking about the same thing, or much closer to the same thing. And you may disagree with the definition, but at least it gives us a starting place so that we are talking about the same thing. So to me, that's what definitions really serve, is to get us a starting place for a discussion.
It's what science is based on.
Right.
It's not. You can theorize all you want, but when you state something as a categorical fact, you better be able to prove it and back it up, and we better be able to check your work.
Right.
To make sure it holds.
Right.
I mean, the internal combustion engine that controlled violence in your Buck Rogers land vehicle that drives you back and forth to work every day is not the product of opinion or belief or faith. It's hard science. It started with the invention of the wheel and the preservation of fire. It's what allowed us to go to the moon and drive around on it. Typical Americans, bloody Yanks. Take their bloody call to the moon. Who needs that, eh? I've lived in Australia. Well, that was a very bad Australian accent, more Cockney,
but they certainly think that way.
They got the Yanks number. Yank tanks, that's what they call our cars, these huge cars.
Okay, so we're going to talk about insanity. So, and I think we were leading up to a definition of insanity. And that our definition has gone through some variations over the years as we've worked on these ideas, and we've actually got a couple. But what, for me, I think works best for me is that insanity is the confusion of my mind-generated reality with actual reality. That I have this subjective perception of what's going on in life, not just my life, but life in general. And I think that's real. And I actually believe that I'm perceiving reality correctly and seeing things the way they are. And the more I confuse my subjective reality with what's really out there, the crazier I am. And this kind of fits in with humility, which we'll probably get to, what we talked about a couple of shows ago. Is the more humble you are about your mind-generated reality, the more you're actually can relate to reality better. But I don't want to go that far.
Yeah, well, I think this begs another definition.
Okay.
What's the definition of actual reality?
I don't know. You tell me.
Okay. Actual reality is, we believe, the absolute truth. Is, and what is the absolute truth? Our definition of reality, which, as far as we're concerned, reality is reality, which means reality is actual reality. Reality is the absolute truth. Reality we define as what is. Not what we think is, not what we hope is, not what we wish wasn't, not what we believe is, not what we have faith is, but what actually is. The truth. That's what reality is.
So, there's can be all sorts of conversations here about, is there something really out there? Does the whole universe exist solely in my mind? As far as we can tell, Western philosophers have been arguing about this for centuries now, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere. Because all I know really is what's in my mind. But that doesn't mean I think there's nothing out there. I think that what we're doing here is we're making a separation here that there really is something out there. There is an actual reality. And yet my perception of it is flawed. My perception of it is very subjective. So all I know about what's really out there is what's in my mind. But that doesn't mean there's nothing out there. And it doesn't mean that, he's not really here. I do think he's really here.
More's the pity.
So maybe we can talk some more about, so to me, it's like, well, how does it get up here? How does that subjective, mind-generated version of reality get in my mind? Why aren't I seeing it, actually?
And I would even, based on this futile search for where, is anything real?
Yeah.
For convenience, since our train is broken down here in town, why don't we just kind of deal with that? Let's allow the physical universe that we all agree that is a bus coming down the street. Mm-hmm. Anybody who doesn't think so can demonstrate it by stepping out in front of it. I wouldn't suggest that. Kids, don't try this at home.
This is not a call to action.
This is not a call to action. It's a call to litigation. Let's allow rocks to be hard, water to be wet, up is up, down is down. The physical universe looks the way it looks. It really is out there. Mm-hmm. That's not our immediate source of what we will call universal human insanity. That's not it. It's our opinions about that physical universe, our inability to actually see the perfection in manifest reality at any given moment. That's our problem. That's what's driving us nuts, and that's what's going to lead, if we're not careful, to the supreme folly of self-extinction as we destroy cut down the last tree and pollute ourselves to death with a combination of a thermonuclear war. That's a real threat for the first time in all of human history. Our insanity is about to get us killed. And of course, punchline is none of us think we're insane, but proceed.
Okay, well, so what Arthur's saying is, let's focus on more subjective things, not the objective physical realm. And, just maybe I would start with, though, that we have a lot of problems just seeing objective reality accurately. That, because that's the way you may say, okay, well, I can see where maybe I, sometimes maybe get angry at somebody because I misunderstand what they're saying. And that's a subjective misperception of reality. But that's kind of understandable because we're not always really clear. But certainly I see physical reality. I mean, I'm looking at that camera and I can see it just the way it is, right? Well, that's one of the reasons optical illusions are so interesting, because they show us that we are not perceiving reality accurately, the actual physical reality out there. We're not seeing it. Something as simple as a misspelled word on a poster that, I mean, how many times have it kind of startles you when you see it, and whoever made the poster completely didn't see it. I mean, that's just, you can, your mind has its expectations of what you should see, and so your mind can completely skip a misspelled word until somebody points it out to you.
Or another example, my friend Twig, who's a terrific blues guitar player. He was rail thin and always had a mustache. And one day decided, what the hell, I'm going to cut it. So he cut half his mustache off and walked around all day with half a mustache. And he consistently said people would be talking to him and interacting with him and not noticing they're talking to a guy with half a mustache. And then they'd look and crack up because it took them that long to notice that he was wearing half his mustache. So
I
the
mean,
mind fills in the blanks.
Clearly, we're not seeing. And another example that I really like is that this was from a book of physics, and that there was I think the Crab Nebula in like 1054 AD was described in Chinese scientific works at that time. The Chinese saw that something had happened in the sky, some explosion had happened in stars. But in the Christian world, it is nowhere to be found in the records of the time, because in the Christian world, there was the belief that the stars could not change. So people did not see it. I mean,
So
that's
that sudden
almost
blob that anybody could look up and see was just apparently
it was like,
overlooked.
maybe there
Does
was
not
like
compute.
there was like a cloud in the sky. Something, it was something else. It could not be that the stars had changed, because the stars cannot change, because that's our theology. So our beliefs affect our perception of physical reality, and that's what's really out there. That's so.
It's a well-known phenomenon that different people who witness the same accident or whatever, have wildly varying accounts.
That's right.
Even though they saw the thing happen, it's all over the road. There's, and there's obviously a very unique point of view. You can,
Right.
they're in factoring that in. It's still not reliable. Human anecdotal reporting on the same event
Right.
or observation of the same event is varies, and that's physical reality.
Right.
Katie's talking about.
Right. That's
And
right.
Rocks are hard and water's wet. Some people think maybe rocks aren't so hard and water's not really that wet, or it's not wet enough.
That's right. That's
They
right.
shouldn't build that mosque in New York City near precious holy ground zero.
Well, that's a good example
Rubbing
right there.
elbows with the porn shops and the off-track
Peep shows.
betting parlor, peep show, glory holes, no doubt.
But there is an example of selective attention. And so if you want to see, psychologists have an enormous numbers of ways that we misperceive reality. And this is getting more towards, away from just optical illusions and not seeing physical reality correctly, but the ways in which our processing skews our thinking in certain ways, and that basically everyone has these same flaws in their thinking processes. And selective attention is one that I think all of us are aware of. And this whole mosque controversy is an example of the way certain commentators are using selective attention. So they're saying, the World Trade Center is a holy site. We can't have a mosque 2 blocks away. And they isolate out that one thing without telling you what else is within that 2-block radius of the World Trade Center site, like Arthur said. And the same buildings complex is a porn store.
3 porn stores are strip joints.
Or within also within 2 blocks. I mean, those commentators are not mentioning
that's
that
American
part.
porn. That doesn't
that's
count.
what it is. It's Christian
patriotic Christian porn, white people's porn.
So there's a whole host of different types of cognitive biases that we are all guilty of. And, positive thinking, selective perception.
What's that syndrome you described so well? The consistent tendency to...
There's the fundamental attribution error, which is where if Arthur makes a mistake, I think it's because he's stupid, or he's just lazy, or I think of it as something that has to do with him as a person.
Grievous character
But
defect.
when I make a mistake, it's outside of me. It's not because of some internal attribution. It's because I was distracted by the loud noise outside, or I didn't have time to do as good a job as I wanted. It has nothing to do with me as a person. And
I do the same thing. Anybody else out there relate to this?
That's right. It's a fundamental attribution error. It's I would say one of those really fundamental ones. And there's we just read a review in the New York Times of some books on one of them was called Error. It was just how humans consistently make mistakes, and even scientists who are supposed to be so objective that they fall prey to these errors, and that you see. They went through reports of what's been published in magazines, and the much more common are the ones that proved the thesis. There's very few reports of the disproving of theses, that scientists are more likely to believe facts that prove what they want than the facts that disprove. And that's also very common. We
ran into that when we were doing our work or research on free will, the myth of free will, when we found philosophers their whole claim to fame is their supposedly dogged willingness to pursue the truth wherever it leads. And instead, they would reach these ridiculous conclusions like life without free will would not be worth living.
Because they wanted to believe free will so badly that they would throw out all the evidence that they could not disprove. But it was not enough to dislodge the belief. And I think that brings us to what we're really saying here, which is...
What are we saying here?
That we are not perceiving reality accurately. That what happens between the time information comes through our senses or comes through our memories is that there is a layer of filtration that happens before it hits our consciousness.
It's a delay in
and
awareness.
What's happening? Well, that's kind of a whole topic in itself, is the delay. But what is the composition of the filtration system are our beliefs, our assumptions about reality.
And the first information we receive from actual reality, whatever that may be, is objective fact data. Before you can apply your subjective opinions, judgments, beliefs, philosophy, prejudices, biases, I
guess.
Before you can do all that stuff to the data, you've got to recognize it first, and that's a function of objective fact data is what we call it. From the whatever that stuff is out there, first thing we register is, say, painting on the wall, and wall painting, colors, just the facts. What was I thinking of just a little while ago about this? Oh, I know what it was. It was PET. It was PET. It was Parent Effectiveness Training. Anybody remember that book? Mm-hmm. It was incredible, and I've used it with my daughter. It was like when she was little and she'd hurt herself. I'd just sit down when she's crying hysterically. It hurts, doesn't it? Where does it hurt? Can you describe it? Can you tell me exactly what happened? You were running and you fell and you skinned your knee, right? And just tell me more about that. And what's it feeling like now? You could even say things like, is there any, close your eyes, does it have any color associated with it? Does it seem to be moving? Does it have any particular shape? What's it feel like exactly? And she would go through it so fast. The next thing you know, the tears would stop. Pain would be vastly reduced. And it occurred to me today that all that is facing the objective fact, just the facts, ma'am, as Joe Friday used to say in Dragnet, just the facts, the objective fact data, and get all the garbage, all the opinion, and all this shouldn't have happened. What did happen to me? I wasn't doing anything.
Right.
All that stuff that comes
story.
Next, the story.
Right.
Remove it, and the pain would just resolve itself, and the trauma would be greatly reduced. Mm-hmm. So that's the objective mind. That's what we got. The objective fact data first, or the objective mind data comes in first.
But as
that takes processing time too. If you're reading a book, it takes time for the reflected light off the page for your mind to resolve those things on the page into letters, into words, into a collection of words called a sentence, into the meaning of the sentence before it reaches your awareness. So that's the first level of mind processing.
And we, that's the part where we think there's no beliefs, but there are. As we said from that Crab Nebula story, there are beliefs that filter objective reality. But as we've said,
Because that's comparatively lucid, compared to what's coming. Something that's sitting there like a spider, just waiting to jump on it.
And that's what we call this. So it's a whole separate belief filter system that we call the subjective beliefs. And these are the beliefs that ascribe meaning to an event or a person, that say there's some variation in quality. There's good, there's bad, there's beautiful, there's ugly, there's
mediocre, there's brilliant.
That's right. There's
and
all
on
these
and on and
all
on
these
and on.
right qualities and variations in value that we ascribe to something, and this is what we say is where we really get into our individualizing of reality. This is where each one of us is completely separate, and why we have so much trouble talking to each other. Because once we've applied all these subjective beliefs to that objective reality that we're sharing, that's why our perceptions are so different, and why we can't understand each other, and also why we have so much trouble dealing with reality itself, because we're lost in this dream world up here, in a delusional reality.
Well, and probably the most damnable part of that illusion is that we're always right. My reality's better than your reality. If we met someone and we thought their outlook on life was superior to ours, we'd change. We'd change our behavior pattern. If they told us to, we'd say, hey, these people are really together. I really definitely need to follow that program, or get with it, or make that sound philosophy part of my life. I'm gonna change my way of thinking. You know why that's so hard and why that's so rare? Because we're all completely encaged, imprisoned, dominated, tyrannized. We're slaves to what we call subjective ego. Let's say we're a blank plate when we're born. The first thing we have to do as toddlers is we have to put together physical reality. We have to learn, first of all, that we're separate. We're a separate unit. In the kind of standard pediatric psychological
model of
wisdom is an infant is one with the mother. It's a newborn. It's like, it's just all connected. There's a particularly special relationship with mom, but other than that, which goes pretty fast these days, when after 2 weeks of maternity leave, you get back to work where you belong, and the infant very soon learns that it is indeed on its own.
That's a good thing you're saying.
Yeah,
you were learning faster.
Learning faster. Just space it. There's a cattle prod, an infant cattle prod to really kind of give you small corrective shocks if you don't obey the rules right away. What do you mean you wet your pants again? You wet your diapers again? So anyway, you're putting objective reality together, which means learning to deal with gravity. You fall over, you put too much pressure on the side of your Pampers, you're going to fall over and clunk your head again. Mm-hmm. You learn to deal with objective reality. We call this objective fact data that the infant's mind starts being programmed with. But Clea was, sorry, I won't mention my daughter, but I already did. I can bleep that out.
Whatever.
When my daughter was being potty trained, her mom used to, Australian, she used to say, "Oh, yuck," when she would find a loaded diaper.
Right.
And I probably started using it too when I made the same discovery. So what she came up with in her early baby talk was, "I've got to uck."
Right. Sure.
It's like.
Yeah, that's how we learn. You take what people around you are saying, and you
but
assume
even then,
that's reality.
There was maybe there was certainly, because we have no idea what kind of brains are in here, really. We use, a tiny percentage of the biocomputer that's sitting up here growing cobwebs. It can observe abortion issues and building a mosque next to holy ground.
Okay.
Anyway, so
because maybe that'll be a good illustration of what we're getting to, which is all right. So you build this objective world, And then what comes pretty quickly is the subjective beliefs. And what Arthur is saying is that yuck had a slight tinge of, or we don't know how much of a tinge of negativity associated with it. That when an adult said that yuck, it had, the child knows that this was not a good thing. So when the child processes that as the subjective belief system starts being put together, that means this is not good. That means I am not good to have produced this because it's making the adults uncomfortable. So that means I am bad. And as Arthur just, when he went through that little thing about his conservative redneck, mouthing of the things about the mosque and whatever, abortion clinics, you could hear it was all over his way he presented that. Was not only was this an incorrect point of view, those people are stupid. Those people, right? They are all these value judgments about those people as persons. And so that's where the objective is. I disagree with your point of view. I think this is wrong. But that means nothing about you as a human being. But what subjective
does,
it's
hard not to be
subjective.
A hater. It's hard not to be afraid of
these
ignorance.
justifications
Damn
over here.
right.
So,
Darn
but it was a perfect illustration because right as we were getting to that thing, there you gave the example of it. So, and this is what we all fall prey to, is that believing that if we disagree with a person's point of view, then we disagree with them as a human being. Then that's something wrong with them as a person. That fundamental attribution error again.
Redneck or dirty hippie, it's coming from the same place. It's coming from hating.
Right.
Well, one of our premises, and this isn't sophistry, it's madness. Hatred is madness. I absolutely agree with it theoretically.
Well, which is why when you say you're angry, you're mad. There's no
That's right. It's exactly right. Mad in the insane sense.
Right.
That the basis of all fear is the unknown. And the basis of all hatred is fear. It is literally impossible, according to our philosophy, to fear something that you don't hate. If you're afraid of it, you hate it. If you're hating it, you're afraid of it. And what you're afraid of, because it comes from the unknown, must be the truth. You're afraid of what the truth may be because you don't know the truth. And the ignorance, I find, ignorant behavior. I grew up in the South with racism all over the place and anti-Semitism, and the worst thing you could be called was a queer. It was, gay homophobia. Just a sea of ignorance. The poor, dumb-butted South, staggering along behind the mule into the 20th century, having to have troops sent down to make us behave. I grew up here, babies, and it's hard. I think that's, and it's a pitfall that I think the progressives or liberals or whatever word used to describe it. It's a pitfall when it comes to dealing with the conservatives, because it's easy to ridicule and demean them as human beings when they're not. They're not stupid. They're not deficient. They are suffering from the same identical malady that makes us hate them back. And that is universal human insanity, which kind of tug us back toward the point. But so we were talking about how the mind processes objective mind data. The baby learns to deal with the physical world. Concurrently, very soon, the baby, a sponge soaking it all up from the environment, starts picking up the prejudices, the opinions, the biases, the philosophy, the religion, the belief systems of the environment. And that's what we call subjective ego data. So you got objective fact data, and then you have subjective ego data, objective mind data and subjective ego data. And the insidious thing, you can look at, Katie talked about, and somehow we never got to this, when we were talking about when I was paralyzed from the neck down for many months, Guillain-Barré syndrome, And I took my first outing from the rehabilitation center with 4 other wheelchair cases, went out to this mall in Jacksonville, Florida, and we had volunteers pushing us. It was like the parade of the dam going through this art show at night at this mall in Jacksonville. And I noticed how people, I could look up ahead and I could see them like lunging into stores and pulling their children to safety so they wouldn't have to see the parade of the doomed coming toward them. Maybe would drool or have some sort of fit or projectile vomit or something. So they were trying to avoid the stark reality of these basket cases coming their way. The only exception I saw to like Lawrence Durrell had this great line. He said, illness invites contempt. The sick man knows it. There's a tribal taboo against deformity or illness or not okayness. And who knows how old that is, that prejudice. The only exception to that subjective value judgment of us, that negative value judgment, were babies in their strollers coming toward us sometimes with pacifiers in their mouths. And they were completely fascinated by these biggers, these big
Right.
people coming by in their adult-sized strollers, and they were just completely fascinated. There was no judgment in their baby eyes.
Right.
You have to learn that stuff.
Right.
But the insidious part is when you start learning it, it gets stored in the mind with the same validity as objective fact data.
As up is up and down is down.
Look both ways when you cross the street is stored with the same validity as people with a different color skin are inferior to people with our color skin.
And, one of the reasons that it's a little harder to talk about today is that after 15 or so years of political correctness, most of us want to pretend on the surface like we've banished all those prejudices from our minds.
Oh, yeah.
We are not racially prejudiced anymore. We're not prejudiced against homosexuals.
We're not sexist.
We don't look at handicapped people with, what do you even call it? We have all these, is handicapped even okay to use anymore? I don't even know if that word is appropriate. Right, we're not sexist. And so, people, well, I'm not those things. And so, I was thinking cultural, one of the reasons it doesn't feel like we're insane, one of the most powerful reasons why we all feel like we're sane every day is because we live in our culture, we share a lot of the same subjective beliefs. And so as long as you agree and accept the subjective beliefs of your culture, you'll be seen as perfectly normal and sane. I was thinking sexism is one. We're supposedly in the post-feminist era.
Oh, yeah.
Where sexism has been banished. And, and I know that's,
You've seen The Bachelorette lately? Or what's the hunk equivalent, The Bachelor?
Well, we actually do video for a living. And I have seen it, that people assume that Arthur is the boss, that he's the technician, he knows how to do all the technical things, he knows how to operate the camera, he knows how to run the computer. And it's even at times when, where we lived before, and I was actually doing almost all of this television show we ran, I would be out in the world, people would see me with the camera and everything, yet when they would call or something, it would be Arthur they'd want to talk to. And it was like they'd seen with their own eyes that I was the one doing it. But that
man must be boss.
Yeah, it's, And just in another similar vein.
It's kind of like the satire on the Virginia Slim cigarette ads. You've come a long way, baby. There was a feminist reply. There was a poster, as a matter of fact, that said, you haven't come a long way, and you're not a baby.
That's right. That's for sure. Or I was thinking, we just talked about going to a funeral recently, and, I pulled out my black, even though we were going to Florida, the only black thing I had was long sleeves, but it was like black funeral, must wear. I think it's Japan. Other countries, white is the color of mourning. But what would it be if I showed up in all white to that funeral, how do you think people would have reacted? They would have probably been shocked. They might not have said anything to me, but their subjective opinion would have been just going through, oh my God, what's wrong with her? Doesn't she, what kind of statement is she sending here?
Well, that fashion tyranny is definitely reduced. I mean, we live, fortunately, in a kind of a fashion anarchy now. You can wear sweatsuits and
I think people, but I noticed people were still in somber
now.
Colors at the funeral.
Yeah.
Nobody was wearing
It's
white.
a Southern conservative
but the point is that these subjective beliefs, that's a subjective belief, what color to wear to a funeral. That you can see, but you look at different cultures and they have different ideas, shows that it's just a belief. There's something inherent in the color.
So where are we going with this?
Well, so we're going to, so there's these subjective beliefs, and it's the confusion of, so the objective beliefs and the subjective beliefs make up a filtration system that alters reality, so that
Heavily.
actual reality.
A racist sees a person with a different skin color coming down the street, and they go into a state of alarm, or they immediately judge that person from all their racist data. This is really not rocket science. It's very simple. What you believe, John Lilly, who did dolphin research and LSD research, described reality as whatever the mind believes to be true either is true or becomes true, within certain limits to be discovered experimentally or experientially. These are further limits to be transcended. Ultimately, there are no limits. But
so you hear people say you create your own reality. Not that what that always sounds to me like is, if I say, I want the sun to rise an hour later today, and I'm really powerful, I could make that sun rise an hour later today.
You can make your breast cancer go away if you were really together.
Right. That's not what we're talking about here.
Wrong.
What we're talking about is the reality in my mind is created through this filtration system. My attitude towards what is out there in the world is what I create.
Okay, so the levels of madness are this. It's our definition of madness, have we said that? Is the confusion of mind-generated reality with actual reality.
That's right.
We have defined actual reality as nothing less than the absolute truth. Reality is what is, period. We now humbly suggest, as we have many times on this show, nobody knows what is. The only thing we know, because know, K-N-O-W, is an absolute state. If I say I know, that means I know something absolutely. And that information, ladies and gentlemen, we humbly suggest, is denied to me and you as well. The only thing, the one thing, all of us can know absolutely, and this is it, is something's going on. Something's happening at your location out there in audience land. Right here, I can assure you I am here. I'm not a fig Newton of your imagination. I don't know if you're real or not. I don't even know that. But I think you are, because I think your endless varieties of experience are desirable, and that experience is valid, and it's happening in your location. But other than, something's going on, and I got a jillion labels for it, and I can tell you my history of it, being a leaf in the wind of it, I don't know what any of it is. I look in a mirror, and I guarantee you, and this is theoretical, it is not my actual, I've had experiences of it. I actually had an experience once where I thought I was going to die, and it scared me so badly that I actually lost my identity for a few hours. I was in a car parked, thank goodness, and I rummaged in the glove compartment and found a postcard that I was going to send to my parents in Florida telling them I was coming home for Christmas. And by studying that card for hours, I was able to put my identity back together, remember who I was. So I've had the experience of really not knowing who I am. It was not pleasant. But the truth, because I wasn't ready for it, but the truth is, I don't know who I am. What am I, a 65-year-old, let's see, a sperm and an egg got together and kind of just started, they created a fertilized egg. Did I say a sperm and an egg? Yeah, sperm and an egg. Sperm fertilized the egg, and this thing started dividing, and 65 years later, here I am on TV, spewing my philosophy out. Yeah, I believe
that says a lot.
Sure, I know who I am. Yeah, that's who I am. You want to hear some more details? Will that help? So there is this huge disconnect, because what makes us crazy, what really makes us crazy is thinking we know. The big word, know.
That's right.
When we know almost nothing.
Right.
If it weren't for the fact that we could say, I absolutely know something's happening, we would know nothing. Know in the ultimate sense. Know in the I know absolutely without any doubt, without. You can't even say the sun's going to come up. First of all, the sun isn't coming up. The earth is rotating on its axis
That's right.
at 1,000 miles an hour toward the star around which we're. Just remember that you're standing on a planet.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what makes us crazy, is the presumption of knowledge that's based completely on thin air.
Right. Well, I wanted to talk about and give an example of a way in which my subjective beliefs bring about a reality. And one of the things that came to mind, and I mentioned this once before in probably a show about relationships, where Arthur and I have been together for 30 years, and I only had one other long-term relationship before that, which was in college for about 3 years. And
you didn't learn your lesson, huh?
Well, that's precisely it. Soon after meeting Arthur, I started seeing how much Arthur was like the man I had gone out with in college. I mean,
gone out with, I like that. I'm sorry.
But in ways I liked and in ways I didn't like, that they were almost identical in these many different ways. And it seemed to me that was a great, and I went through some things, and one of the things I realized was that it was me. I was looking for a man who complemented my ways of playing the relationship game. But that's just another way of saying that I have subjective beliefs in my mind about relationships and about how a relationship that I can be in looks. One of the things that I've had as a subjective belief about my life for a long time is that I'm a loser. That people really, if they really knew me, they wouldn't. If you really knew who I was, you wouldn't like me. That I'm a phony, and you could see. Somebody talked about this. I was afraid to get on the air because I was afraid people would laugh at me because it was like, she's acting like she knows what she's talking about. Okay, so I have all these things that, ordinarily I try to go through life not letting you see these things. I try to put on my happy, smiling front face
how are you?
to hide
nice to
these
see
things.
you. How you been? Good. Me too. Great.
But when it comes to a relationship, here we're talking about the intimate partner who's gonna, there's only so far you can carry this front. So they're going to see this. So I have to find somebody who's as crippled as I am, and crippled in the right ways.
Reporting for duty, sir.
That's right. So he won't, because anybody that was really together would leave me pretty quickly because they'd find out what a loser I was. Mm-hmm. And they had, and
opposites attract.
These are my subjective beliefs creating this reality. So you could say the reality, the type of relationship I create is going to be the same over, and this is why people have the same relationships over and over again.
It's not a coincidence.
Because their subjective beliefs filtering reality are only allowing you to see the certain things that you want to see and disregard the rest. I think that was from a song once.
It had to be you.
That's right. So these subjective beliefs, that's where they're blocking out certain things and highlighting other things and allowing us to see only the things that confirm our preconceptions about reality. Because, as Arthur said, we like to be right. That goes back to survival.
We have to be right.
In order for the subjective ego to continue its power over us and to survive, it has to be right, because if it's wrong, it's dead.
And that segues into, just really briefly, our cornerstone of our work is survival. We define survival as the effort of a specific form to maintain its existence, structural integrity. Everything in the universe that's surviving, and that's everything, is trying to maintain itself unchanged through time because it equates change with death. We are completely under the spell of established value judgments, which are opinions, subjective opinions, posing as objective fact. Those beliefs are like living ghosts. They're demons, all the demons you ever want to meet. They are entities that consider themselves to exist and perpetuate themselves through time. And the only way they can do that, the only way they can survive unchanged, what you're about to hear is a perfect parasite-host relationship. We are the host, and our beliefs keep us under control and preserve their structural integrity through time, as no physical form can. Everything physical is changing all the time, by persuading us that they're right. And we are so under the sway of these things that we actually think they are us. We are our opinions. That's who we are. That's what makes us unique human beings. Mm-hmm. Which in one level is true, but it's also what makes us really crazy human beings. Like people 2,000 years later are still misunderstanding Jesus. They think Jesus is coming back any day in the clouds and with the angels in the sky. Lord, so glad you can finally make it back, you know. Too bad you couldn't show up before the most blood-soaked century in human history, called the 20th. You couldn't stop the Germans in the concentration camps. What are you coming back now for? Oh, yeah, the temple. The chosen people get to build a temple, and then it's okay. Oy. Whatever you want to believe, what self-fulfilling prophecy that's going to lead to the extermination of the human race after 4 billion years of evolution, whatever floats your boat. It's challenging, that stuff, but it's so hard. That's why habits are so hard to break.
Well, that's a good example is the nuclear example, that better dead than red. That Cold War slogan said, our country, that the United States of America,
200-year-old political experiment,
is more important than the survival of the human race. We would rather use our nuclear weapons and kill every single person on the planet,
which is possible,
than have something happen to our precious country. I mean, is that sane thinking? I mean,
you know what they call it? You know what they call them? You know what the acronym for mutually assured destruction is?
Right.
MAD.
That's right. And we've
Alfred E. Newman is
operated
a
under
piker
that.
compared to the Defense Department.
And we've all operated under that for 50, 60 years now. And we've all just accepted that as normal.
$550 billion a year on the books going into the Defense Department. $600 billion. Who cares? It's $1 trillion. $1,000 billion a year. When this country is in the condition it's in, so a bunch of peg military-industrial complex. I'm getting angry again.
Well,
I'm trying
think
to
about
watch
that.
the
Think
anger.
about that. I mean.
But that's it, because you're so misinformed. That's what's so scary about you.
What's interesting, when the astronauts went out into space and took the photos of planet Earth for the first time, one of the reasons that was so startling was there were no lines on it. That we were all raised looking at maps of the world with lines on it that said, this is the United States, this is Canada, this is Mexico. As if those borders had real, tangible existence. And we grow up really believing that there's
I grew up with
something
some lines
there.
like white only,
And
white
so
colored.
when you go out into space and you look at the planet, you go, hey, wait a minute. There's no line there. There's no separation. If anything, when you get out there, it looks like this is one small, fragile lifeboat that we all better take care of, and we better stop worrying so much about those lines. But how many lives have been lost because of those lines that exist only in our minds?
That's right, and things change, and it turns out that integration
That's right.
did
Those
not
lines
spell the
didn't matter.
end of the world as so many people insisted it would.
That's right. Those lines were only in our minds.
That's right.
They did not exist in reality.
So,
Right. That's right. Races are another thing. If you talk to an anthropologist, they'll tell you there is no such thing as race. Races are a completely subjective invention of human thinking, that they have no basis in objective science. There is no difference between people at all. But it's been
Of course,
very,
you keep people
very
on
real.
de facto segregation for endless years and encourage just anyway.
So
you see what we're talking about? We're talking about believing you know when you don't know is really the essence of insanity. Someone who is anorexic, who looks in a mirror and thinks she's fat when she's looking at a human skeleton who starves themselves to death, that's how skewed, that's how confused, how red-shifted toward the illogical your opinions about reality can influence what you're looking at. It's the basis of racism. It's the basis of cultural cleansing and willingness to shred your constitution and be so stupid and misinformed that you forget that the freedom of religious expression, I'd like to see us do that in Saudi Arabia and build a Christian church. That's right. It's Saudi Arabia. It's a rat-ass country. In terms of freedom, there's no freedom there. It's a theocracy. And thank God our country isn't like that. We should show that Osama bin Laden does not win by poisoning us against people of the Muslim faith. I mean, I've said some things about the way women are treated in my experience. I lived in Afghanistan for about 6 months, a couple of times. So I've been in a Muslim culture, and you know, it's dismaying the way, dismaying is a polite word.
And actually, Arthur, you'll see me laugh when you are talking about the anorexic just a couple of minutes ago, because you use the personal pronoun she.
That, it's often she.
I know, but there was
she.
the connection of the anorexic and the female, like, you know.
No, I thought about it before I said it, but it's true. Anorexia. But if you look it up, do the research, you will see that women are overwhelmingly prone to that because they're under such enormous pressure to be the
conform to our
fashion
society's
plate,
idea.
whatever the latest,
sure,
apotheosis of bachelorette. I want to look like a bachelorette.
So maybe we could end. We're getting towards the end of the program. So all right. So we've been talking about insanity being the confusion of our mind-generated reality with actual reality. So what is sanity? And I would say, as I said kind of at the beginning of the program, that this links back into what we did in the humility program. Well,
can I just say this real quick, just to bring us up to that? Because why is insanity universal, which we offensively say? Our book is called "We Are All Innocent by Reason of Insanity," because nobody knows actual reality. Nobody. Greatest scientist, God, scientific God that we worship, would, if at all honest, would say they don't know what one dot of matter is. They don't know what one little particle wave whatever is. Nobody knows actual reality, but we all, the exigencies of survival require us to go through life like we really do know who we are, what we are, where we are, when we are, why we are, what we're doing, where we came from, and where we're going. Truth is, we don't know any of that stuff. No, absolutely. So because absolute reality is denied to us at this phase of evolution, to put it mildly, thinking we know or believing that our knowledge is actual reality is insane. And we're all prey to it. That's why we're all nuts, because we all do it to varying degrees.
Right.
The poor unfortunates, like the anorexics, like the schizophrenics, are so confused in their relationship with objective reality that we put them away, or we medicate them heavily and point the finger at them and say they're crazy because they can't hold a job. As Katie's dad, who's a psychiatrist, put it beautifully, was that it's basically your ability to function in society is what we in the psychology professions designate sane.
Right.
So I would say that what we're talking about is it's a progressive toward enlightenment, that's what sanity is.
Right.
And our yardstick, why don't you go ahead, because I'm sure that's what...
Well, that's a nice way to put it, is that I would say that that's exactly what sanity is enlightenment. So the more, and what the path to that I've experienced is humility. And that's just being the state in which I question my beliefs. I question my assumptions. That I don't take my mind for granted as much. One thing I was thinking, I used to take myself so seriously. I never laughed at myself. I hated the idea that I was ever wrong or that I'd had a wrong thought. And I loved Arthur's mother. And one of the things I loved about her was that she laughed at herself all the time. And if she'd made a mistake, she'd laugh. And I really admired that and tried to start doing that in my life. And I have been able to a certain extent. And that's just recognizing that I'm wrong sometimes, recognizing that my perception of reality is flawed, so I've made a mistake or I'm limited in my knowing. I'm not going to say I do this all the time, but and just both. Laugh at it.
Well, let me say this. I think that what you're describing, humility, is nothing more than getting in touch with the objective facts, just the facts. What do we really know? Mm-hmm. If we really ask that question honestly, you'll find that every single thing you believe ends in I don't know. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I don't know anything absolutely. And that's no reason to despair. But what it is an invitation to do is embrace a position of humility, of being willing to question your beliefs and concepts and religious ideas and opinions. Mm-hmm. To not go through life, the unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates said that about 2,500 years ago. That to get in touch with maybe there's something more. Maybe there's a limit to how much I know. Maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am. Maybe I'm being controlled by beliefs that have no real basis in fact. Mm-hmm. And to be open to change in the process. So I would say that the scale is the more we operate from our objective mind. If you're in front of a judge, you better pray that judge is objective, not ruled by subjective opinion and biases, but objective. Look only at the facts and look at the extenuating circumstances and factor everything in before making a judgment. So the more you operate from your objective mind, the saner you are. The more you just coast along on your subjective opinions about everything that you learned and put together basically by the time you were 2 years old, and the rest of life is nothing but a variation on a fixed theme, mm-hmm. the crazier you are. Up to the point of looking at a skeleton in the mirror and thinking it's fat. You can do that. You can go out and kill people in the street because you think they're going to get you and you're trying to protect yourself. Mm-hmm. There's that distortion, and that's all from the subjective ego. It's not from the objective mind. They're not trying to hurt you, but this paranoid schizophrenic thinks so.
Well, and so maybe this will kind of be a good time to do a criminal justice system next week, because this is, what I was thinking of saying was that one of the things that the subjective belief, to go back way to the beginning, that fundamental attribution error, you think if somebody does evil, they are evil. And that's, psychologists tell us that when you meet somebody new, you size them up within seconds. Fractions of a second. You scan them up and down, and you've locked away in your mind already how, where you two fit on the pecking order, who's superior, who's inferior, how you need to relate to that person, and that's because of all this subjective belief filtration. And what if we question that thing? What if you don't, because I see myself doing that. I meet somebody and you can just like, oh, I don't really need to pay attention to that person, or, they're more interesting. Well, what if we, kind of put aside our prejudices about that person and, and allow them to be more than what, that just because maybe they did something we don't like doesn't mean they're bad through and through.
Oh, in a nutshell, here's a little preview. Next week at 7:30, we're going to talk about why all crime, I'm talking about littering, I'm talking about shoplifting, is an act of insanity. So you can imagine what we think of the criminal justice system that treats people meanly. Got to go.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully you'll watch us again.